Hello, folks. Hi, this is Neil once again. This video, I haven't made a video in a few. I've been pretty much busy lately. Actually went to New York City for about 4 days to visit my mom, my family. My mom celebrated her 83rd birthday, and family friends celebrated her 50th birthday. But while in New York City, I did not experience any of the tampering of my food, my water. Went out and ate a few times, but haven't didn't really experience any of that stuff. I did, however, experience the mind control aspect and the subliminal messaging. Um, but for the most part, my trip was very pleasant and very fruitful. While there, I went to the uh, Brooklyn Botanical Garden at the Japanese Cherry Blossom Festival, which is held every year. Also went to the Tribeca Film Festival, and also went to Battery Park City, hung out for a little bit, and really great weekend. So really enjoyed my 4 day trip, and happy to be back, of course, at home. When I got back home, of course, the tampering started again. Um, I woke up one night in the middle of the night to the sound of my neighbors upstairs once again. But hopped on my guitar and played my guitar, and then the noise stopped. So I went back to bed. The next day, I went to the gym. I usually boil my water and filter it, and drank about 3 glasses, actually 4 glasses of water during the day. Around 4 o'clock, went to the gym, came home, drank some water, and it felt funny. My body felt funny actually. And so I've been eating really lean, and every time they see results, like I said, they start tampering, and that's just the way it is. So my thing is to eat healthy, keep on eating healthy, keep on exercising, keep making these videos to show you guys that this stuff is actually happening. So I like to start off this video, the subject actually, by reading some quotes from this book. And this book is called Medical Apartheid, and it's by Harriet A. Washington, and it chronicles the illegal and unethical, dehumanizing experimentations on black Americans from colonial times to present. And the reason why I'm reading this book is basically to get into the minds of these individuals that are that who've built this targeting program, this experimental program, mind control, torture, just to to see how they look at people, because it's obvious they don't see us as people to treat us in such a way, which means that they have not any empathy, which basically makes you human, because empathy allows you to identify with pain and suffering, in others. So they lack that. So therefore, they're the ones that are not human beings. They're basically psychopaths. And I'd like to read a few quotes from the book before I get into the subject of man rights in the age of unethical and illegal mind control and torture. So the first quote says, James Mariam Sims is an important figure in the history of experimentation with African Americans because he so well embodies the dual face of American medicine to which racial health disparities owe so much. Sims is revered as a woman's benefactor, although he conducted years of nightmarishly painful and degrading experimentations without amnesia or consent on a group of slave women. Now, I need to say that during this time that Mr. Sims, there was anesthesia available, but he did not give any of his victims, and I call them victims rather than test subjects because that's what they were. Sims was a maniacal madman, a psychopath, and a sociopath. And he enjoyed the pain and suffering of his victims. Next quote: pro-slavery physician scientists such as Josiah Clark Knott, Samuel George Morton, Louis Agassiz, and George Robin Glidden, leader of the American School of Ethnology, went on the defensive. They responded by portraying the enslaved blacks as inherently debased and immutably so. No amount of training, education, or good treatment could make him equal of a white man. Next quote: I took him in some measure under my care, procured for him suitable lodging and accommodation, induced many persons to visit him, and kept him under my strict and constant observation and by his permission. For a slight reward, emphasis added in brackets, made him such an experiment as suited for my purpose. Next quote: the future of the Negro lies more in the research laboratory than in the schools. When diseased, he should be registered and forced to take treatment before he offers his diseased mind and body on the altar of academic and professional education. It was cheaper to use niggers than cats because they were everywhere and cheap experimental animals. And this was said by Harry Bailey, MD, a neurosurgeon back in 1960. So, this is how they look at people. And these experiments are racially biased. Now, of course, this is not just about black folks, but it's about all folks, poor people, people who cannot afford a lawyer, people who cannot afford perhaps a private investigator to find out exactly what's going on with them. So, it doesn't matter today, what color you are, it's just your status in society. But it is racially biased in the sense that more black people are being experimented on than any other ethnic group in the United States and even worldwide. You look at Africa, you look at how all these new treatments that they're developing, they're using people in Africa, illegally, taking advantage of them, manipulating them, not telling the truth behind what they're doing. So I just want to clear that and get that out the way, that these experiments are done on poor people, period. Right? But like I said, it's racially biased because more black people are being affected by these experimentations. So when I think about the unethical experimentations that are done on black people, it really is mind-boggling to me that someone in position of authority does not blow the whistle on this kind of stuff. It really does. And I realize that fear is a great tool to use to silence people. But at some point, you as an individual have to look at your humanity and ask yourself, would I expect someone to stay quiet if this was being done to me? My answer for me personally, no, I would not. Instead of, if I know that someone was about to be experimented on, I would go to the authorities or warn that person what's about to happen to them. But apparently, fear is being used, fear of losing your job, fear of being killed, I say actually murdered, fear of losing your family, your material possessions. It's all based on fear to keep people quiet. So I would like to read this essay, and it's from Ayn Rand, whom reading her material has really, really enlightened me far beyond anything that I've hoped to have learned. So, in terms of the rights of people, natural rights of people, the right to be free, the right to uh, be protected and to be protected from these types of experimentations. Being a target individual is not fun. It's not fun. Many people have lost their lives, and recently in the news, one of the lawyers for the Guantanamo Bay detainees committed suicide. A single gunshot wound, which it seems like, that this guy was stumbling upon something, because he has actually gotten a few folks released, and there's some people that did not like that and perhaps targeted him and drove him to the point of suicide. And so I'm asking you guys to speak out and do not let this happen to you. So this essay is called Man's Right, and it's by Ayn Rand, and I will post the link at the bottom of the video. So, if one wishes to advocate a free society, that is capitalism, one must realize that its indispensable foundation is the principle of individual rights. If one wishes to uphold individual rights, one must realize that capitalism is the only system that can hold and protect them. And if one wishes to gauge the relationship of freedom to the goals of today's intellectuals, one may gauge it by the fact that the concept of individual rights is evaded, distorted, perverted, and seldom discussed. Most conspicuously seldom by the so-called conservatives. So rights, what are rights? Rights are a moral concept, the concept that provides a logical transition from the principle guiding an individual's action to the principle guiding his relationship with others. The concept that preserves and protects individual morality in a social context, the link between the moral code of a man and the legal code of a society. Between ethics and politics, individual rights are the means of subordinating society to moral law. So what exactly does that mean? Well, rights mean the same thing basically you want for yourself, and every human being wishes to be free, to have liberty, happiness, to live their lives free from injustice, inequality, racism, free from being tortured. So, these rights that you want for yourself basically is what you should want for other people. So if you want people to treat you good, you should treat people good, in a sense. And if you don't want people to violate your humanity, your dignity, then you should not violate someone's humanity and dignity. You should recognize as sovereign beings that is exactly what we are, sovereign beings. We belong to ourselves. We wouldn't want anyone to do us harm, so why should we do anyone harm? So every political system is based on some code of ethics. The dominant ethics of mankind's history were variants of the altruist collectivist doctrine which subordinated the individual to some higher authority, either mystical or social. Consequently, most political systems were variants of the same status, tyranny, differing only in degree, not in basic principles, limited only by the accidents of tradition, of chaos, of bloody strife, and periodic collapse. Under all such systems, morality was a code applicable to the individual, but not to the society. Society was placed outside the moral law as its embodiment or source or exclusive interpreter, and the incalculate of self-sacrificial devotion to social duty was regarded as the main purpose of ethics in man's earthly existence. So once again, um, what exactly is this paragraph saying? In terms, and I'm going to read this part again. Consequently, most political systems were variant of the same status tyranny, differing only in degree, not in basic principles, limited only by the accidents of tradition, of chaos, of bloody stripes, and periodic collapse. So, in terms of political system, you know, everything that we do is basically cultural based. We based our governments, our laws on the culture of the society, in a sense. Um, and as time goes by, the cultures that does not include human rights, the culture that is filled with tyranny, dictatorships, periodically people will uprise and those societies will collapse. Those political systems will collapse because people are always looking for a better political system, one which is equal in its distribution of law, of policies, that sort of thing. So, and which is important in our existence because we need to live in a society that we feel is fair to us as individuals. So since there is no such entity as society, since society is only a number of individual men, this meant in practice that the rulers of society were exempt from moral law, subject only to traditional rituals. They held total power and exacted blind obedience on the implicit principle of the good is that which is good for society or for the tribe, the race, the nation, and the ruler's edict are its voice on earth. So, um, this short paragraph I think is very, very important because it basically gets into the mind of dictators, how they think. They think that by doing this would be good for society. So, for example, if you happen to be a Christian, and many people say America is a Christian nation, but it really wasn't. It really isn't, and it was never founded on the basis of Christianity for this exact reason, because the church basically controlled the monarchy, and whatever the church wanted, the monarchy made its laws applicable to the people based on the church's uh, decisions or the church policies. So you had the Bronze Age, the age of the Bronze Age, type of mentality, where if you did not believe in God, if you had sex outside of marriage, if a woman was too flirtatious, or if a woman was, you know, uh, speak her mind, very independent, they would basically, burn, murder, that sort of thing. Black folks were treated as less than the common house animals. They did not believe black people had souls, so they were able to brutalize black people, to a great degree, in a very horrific and horrendous fashion. But not just black people, too, also Asian people, Indian people, as we see, we learned from Gandhi, and perhaps before that. So this is very, very important because it's true. People say, well, they see stuff going on that's very, very wrong, and they say, well, that's society. But no, we are society. A group of individuals make up society, and so that's very important. Okay, so this was true of all status system under all variants of the altruist collective ethics, mystical or social, the divine rights of kings, summarize the political theory of the first vox populi, vox dei of the second, as witness the theocracy of Egypt, with the pharaohs as an embodied God, the unlimited majority rules of democracy of Athens, the welfare state run by the emperors of Rome, the inquisitions of the late Middle Ages, the absolute monarchy of France, the welfare state of Bismarck of Prussia, the gas chambers of Nazi Germany, the slaughterhouse of the Soviet Union. All these political systems were expressions of the altruist collectivist ethics, and their common characteristics is the fact that society stood above the moral law as an omnipotent sovereign whim worshiper. Thus, politically, all these systems were variants of an amoral society. The most profoundly revolutionary achievement of the United States was the subordination of society to moral law. Now, I can say that that was probably true before World War II, but not true for all people, of course, because it was morally wrong to have slaves. It was morally wrong to brutalize and rape black women, men, and children. It was very wrong to lynch. It was very wrong to force them into these types of illegal experimentations. You know, and then the Tuskegee experiment, the prison experiments. You know, so these things in American society, even though America was the beacon and still is the beacon of hope and freedom, it sometimes can be very selective in who certain statutes are applied to as far as ethnic groups. Because right now we have a crackdown, not really a crackdown, but you know, a direct targeting of Muslim Americans, just like in World War II, Japanese Americans were placed in concentration camps. Now you have the CIA infiltrated Muslim communities, wreaking havoc, and all that stuff. So, a right. Actually, all previous systems have regarded man as a sacrificial means to the end of others, the society as an end in itself. The United States regarded man as an end in himself, and society as a means to the peaceful, orderly, voluntary coexistence of individuals. All previous systems that held that man's life belonged to society, that society can dispose of him in any way it pleases, and that any freedom he enjoys in his only by favor by the permission of society, which may be revoked at any time. The United States held that man's life is his by right. I'm going to repeat that. The United States held that man's life is his by right, which means by moral principle and by his nature, that a right is the property of an individual, that society as such has no rights, and that the only moral purpose of a government is the protection of individual rights. And that is why the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were written. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that. And the United States held that man's life is his by right, which means by moral principle and by his nature, that a right is the property of the individual. A right is the property of an individual. That society has no rights, and that the only moral purpose of a government is the protection of human rights. Once again, the only moral purpose of a government is the protection of individual rights. A right is a moral principle defining the sanctioning of man's freedom of action in a social context. There is only one fundamental right. All the others are its consequences or, can't pronounce this word, corollaries. There we go. A man's right to his own life. Life is a process of self-sustaining and self-generated action. The right of life means the right to engage in self-sustaining and self-generated actions, which means the freedom to take all the action required by the nature of a rational being for the support, the furtherance, the fulfillment, and the enjoyment of his own life. Such is the meaning of the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The concept of a right pertains only to action, specifically to freedom of action. It means freedom from physical compulsion, coercion, or interference by other men. Thus, for every individual, a right is the moral sanction of a positive of his freedom to act on his own judgment, for his own goals, by his own voluntary, uncoerced choice, and to his neighbors, his rights impose no obligations on them except of a negative kind to abstain from violating his rights. So once again, as I stated, that you as an individual and as a sovereign being, you have the right to make up your own mind without coercions. No one should be able to force you or manipulate you into making any decision. The right to life is the source of all rights, and the right to property is their only implementation. Without property rights, no other rights are possible. Since man has to sustain by his own life by his own efforts, the man who has no rights to the product of his efforts has no means to sustain his life. The man who produces while others dispose of his product is a slave, which is very true. Yourself, your body, your mind, your intellectual property, um, you know, that's exactly what it is. It's your property. Your body, your mind is your property. So, you own this. No one else can own you. You own yourself. So bear in mind that the right to property is a right to action. Like all the others, it is not the right of an object it's not a right to an object, but to the action and the consequences of producing or earning that object. It is not a guarantee that a man will earn any property, but only a guarantee that he will own it if he earns it. It is the right to gain, to keep, to use, and to dispose of material values. The concept of individual rights is so new in human history that most men have not grasped it fully to this day. In accordance with the two theories of ethics, the mystical or the social, some men assert that rights are a gift from God, others that rights are a gift of society. But in fact, the source of right is man's nature. The Declaration of Independence stated that men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Whether one believes that man is the product of a creator or of nature, the rights of man's origin does not alter the fact that he is an entity of a specific kind, a rational being, that he cannot function successfully under coercion, and that rights are a necessary condition of his particular mode of survival. The source of a man's right is not by divine law or congressional law, but the law of identity. And I repeat, the source of a man's rights is not divine law or congressional law, but the law of identity. A is A and man is man. Rights are conditions of existence required by man's nature for his proper survival. If man is to live on earth, it is right for him to use his mind. It is right to act on his own, and it's right to act on his own free judgment. It is right to work for his values and to keep the product of his work. If life on earth is his purpose, he has a right to live as a rational being. Nature forbids him the irrational. To violate man's right means to compel him to act against his own judgment or to expropriate his values. Basically, there is only one way to do it, by the use of physical force. There are two potential violators of man's rights, the criminal and the government. The great achievement of the United States was to draw a distinction between these two by forbidding to the second the legalized version of the activities of the first. The Declaration of Independence laid down the principle that to secure these rights, government are instituted amongst men. This provides the only valid justification of a government and define its only proper purpose, to protect the rights by protecting him from physical violence. So remember that a man's right can only be taken away by physical violence. Why do you think we go to war when human rights are being violated? Because those people being violated by taking away their property, by the forcing of women and children, the raping, the violation of that person's sovereignty. Okay, it cannot be taken. For me to go to a person and says, hey, bud, I like your car. Give me your car. That person is gonna look at me and say, no way. Yeah, I work for this car. You're not gonna get my car. And so the only way for me to take his car is basically by, either assaulting him or, by stealing his property in a sense. So, which to me, that's violence in another form of fashion. So the only way that man rights can be taken away is by physical force, or his property taken away by physical force. Now today, in the age of technology, of course, one can go into your bank account and take your money, but that's still a violation, and it's still a physical action. Thus, the government function was changed from the role of ruler to the role of servant. The government was set to protect man from criminal, and the Constitution was written to protect man from the government. So the government was set to protect man from criminal, and the Constitution was written to protect man from the government. The Bill of Rights was not directed against private citizens, but against the government, as an explicit declaration that individual rights supersedes any public or social power. Individual rights supersede any public or social power. The result was the pattern of a civilized society which, for the brief span of some 150 years, America came close to achieving. Notice, it says close to achieving. A civilized society is one in which physical force is banned from human relationships, in which the government, acting as a policeman, may use force only in retaliation and only against those who initiate its use. This was the essential meaning and intent of America's political philosophy, implicit in the principle of individual rights. but it was not formulated explicitly nor fully accepted or consistently practiced. America's inner contradiction was the altruist collectivist ethics. Altruism is incompatible with freedom, with capitalism, and with individual rights. One cannot combine the pursuit of happiness with the moral status of a sacrificial animal. It was the concept of individual rights that had given birth to a free society. It was with the destruction of individual rights that the destruction of freedom had to begin. A collectivist tyranny dares not enslave a country by an outright confiscation of its values, material or moral. It has to be done by a process of internal corruption, just as in the material realm, the plundering of a country's wealth is accomplished by inflating the currency. So today one may witness the process of inflation being applied to the realm of rights. The process entails such a growth of newly promulgated rights, and people do not notice the fact that the meaning of the concept is being reversed. Just as bad money drives out good money, so does printing press rights negate authentic rights. Consider the curious fact that never has there been a proliferation of all over the world of two contradictory phenomena of alleged new rights and of slave labor camps. The gimmick was the switch of the concept of rights from the political to the economic realm. The Democratic Party platform of 1960 summarized the which boldly and explicitly. It declared that the Democratic administration will reaffirm the Economic Bill of Rights, which Franklin Roosevelt wrote into our national conscience 16 years ago. Now, of course, this essay was written back in the day. So, but anyway, bear clearly in mind the meaning of the concept of rights when you read the list which the platform offers. The right, number one, the right to a useful and remunerative job in the industries or shops or farms or mines of the nation. 2. The right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation. 3. And 2 is very important because it instills quality of life. 3. The right of every farmer to raise and sell his product at a return which gives him and his family a decent living. 4. The right of every businessman, large and small, to trade in an atmosphere of freedom from unfair competition and domination by monopolies at home and abroad. 5. The right to every family to a decent home. 6. The right to adequate medical care and the opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health. 7. The right to adequate protection from the economic fears of old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment. 8. The right to a good education. A single question added to each of the above 8 clauses would make the issues clear. At whose expense? Jobs, food, clothing, recreation, homes, medical care, education, etc. do not grow in nature. These are man-made values, goods and services produced by men, who is to provide them. And if some men are entitled by right to the product of the work of others, it means that those others are deprived of rights and condemned to slave labor. Any alleged rights of one man which necessitate the violation of the right of another, is not and cannot be a right. No man can have a right to impose an unchosen obligation, an unrewarded duty, or involuntary servitude on another man. There is no such thing as the right to enslave. A right does not include the material implementation or the right by other men. It includes only the freedom to earn that implementations by one's own effort. Observe in the context the intellectual precision of the founding fathers. They spoke of the right to the pursuit of happiness, not of the right to happiness. It means that a man has the right to take the action he deems necessary to achieve his happiness. It does not mean that others must make him happy, which is very true. But even though that, in our rights, it does not mean that, we have to make others happy. But speaking of your humanity, that it is in your humanity that you wish to see others happy, and you make a contribution to make others happy, because you would hope that someone in your time of need will make a contribution to you being happy. This is how the human race will grow as a collective, when we wish to see every man, woman, and child happy, free from tyranny, free from enslavement. Let's see. The right to life means that a man has a right to support his life by his own work on any economic level, as high as his ability will carry him. It does not mean that others must provide him with the necessities of life. The right of property means that a man has a right to take the economic actions necessary to earn him property, to use it and to dispose of it. It does not mean that others must provide him with property. The right of free speech means that a man has the right to express his ideas without dangers of suppression, interference, or punitive actions by the government. It does not mean that others must provide him with a lecture hall, a radio station, or a printing press through which to express his ideas. Any undertaking that involves more than one man requires the voluntary consent of every participant. Every one of them has the right to make his own decision, but none has the right to force his decision on others. Okay, so, which of course, once again, is true. But then, we also have to think about our humanity and how we would like to see other people happy, and care for their well-being, that sort of thing. So if you see a homeless person on the street, and if you have the means to provide that person a home, it's the human thing to do to provide that person a home. Now, you don't have to, but in speaking of humanity and your care for others, it's a noble thing to do to provide somebody with a home or a meal or some clothes, that sort of thing. So these things are, man's rights are very important, but it does not mean that, let's say, for example, the Jews in Germany. Of course, they all have their rights as individuals, and if you were to say, well, you know what, they had their own rights, so, they have the right to come out of that situation. But it's hard when you're trying to come out of a situation under the gun, under the gas chamber, under laws that are meant to break you as a human being. So human beings that are enjoying the freedoms of of life, liberty, and happiness, as a human being, you have an obligation to want that for someone and to help participate in someone experiencing life, liberty, and happiness. Because it would be a shame if we had let all those Jews die in Germany, and it would be a shame if slavery still existed today. Okay, any undertaking that involves more than one man requires the voluntary consent of every participant. Every one of them has a right to make his own decision, but none has the right to force his decision on the others. And I repeated that because that's very important. You have the right to make your own decision. You do not have the right to force people to make decisions based on how you feel. You know, whether or not you think something is right. Okay, you do not have the right to make that decision. Every individual must be allowed to make their own decisions. There's no such thing as a right to a job, which is true, once again. There is only the right of free trade, that is, a man's right to take a job if another man chooses to hire him. There is no right to a home, only the right of free trade. The right to build a home or to buy it. There is no right to a fair wage or a fair price if no one chooses to pay it. To hire a man or to buy his product. There are no rights of consumers to milk, shoes, movies, or champagne if no producer chooses to manufacture such items. There is only the right to manufacture them oneself. There are no rights of special groups. There are no rights of farmers, of workers, of businessmen, of employees or employers, of the old, the young, of the unborn. There are only the right of man, rights possessed by every individual man, by all men as individuals. Property rights and the right of free trade are man's only economic rights. They are, in fact, political rights, and there can be no such thing as an economic Bill of Rights. But observe that the advocates of the latter have all but destroyed the former. Remember that rights are a moral principle which defines the rights of man's freedom of action, but imposes no obligation on other men. Private citizens are not a threat to one another's rights of freedom. A private citizen who resorts to physical force and violates the rights of others is a criminal, and men have legal protection against him. Criminals are a small minority in a country, in the age of country, in any age or country, and the harm they have done to mankind is infinitesimal, or I just say mankind is infinite when compared to the horror, the bloodshed, the wars, the persecution, the confiscation, the famine, the enslavement, the wholesale distribution perpetrated by mankind's government. Potentially, a government is the most dangerous threat to man's rights. It holds a legal monopoly on the use of physical force against legally disarmed citizens. When unlimited and unrestricted by individual rights, a government is man's deadliest enemy. It is not as protection against private action, but against governmental actions that the Bill of Rights were written. Now observe the process by which the protection is being destroyed. The process consists of ascribing to private citizens the specific violations constitutionally forbidden to the government, which private citizens have no power to commit, and thus freeing the government from all restrictions. The switch is becoming progressively more obvious in the field of free speech. For years, the collectivists have been propagating the notion that a private individual refusal to finance an opponent is a violation of the opponent's rights of free speech and an act of censorship. It is censorship, they claim, if a newspaper refuses to employ or publish writers whose ideas are diametrically opposed to its policies. It is censorship, they claim, if businessmen refuse to advertise in a magazine that denounces, insults, and smears them. It is censorship, they claim, if a TV sponsor objects to some outrage perpetrated on a program he is financing, such as the incident of Algier Hiss being invited to denounce former Vice President Nixon. And then there is Chairman of the Federal Communication Commission, Newton N. Minow, who declares there is censorship by ratings, by advertisers, by networks, by affiliates that reject programming offered to their areas. It is the same Mr. Minow who threatened to revoke the license of any station that does not comply with his views on programming and who claims that that is not censorship. Consider the implications of such a trend. And I'm almost finished here, so bear with me. Censorship is a term pertaining only to governmental action. No private action is censorship. No private individual or agencies can silence a man or suppress a publication. Only the government can do so. The freedom of speech of private individuals includes the right not to disagree, not to listen, and not to finance one's own antagonists. But according to such doctrines as the Economic Bill of Rights, an individual has no rights to dispose of his own material means by the guidance of his own convictions and must hand over his money indiscriminately to any speaker or propagandist who have a right to his property. This means that the ability to provide the material tools for the expression of ideas deprive a man of the right to hold any ideas. It means that a publisher has to publish books he considers worthless, false, or evil. That a TV sponsor has to finance commentators who choose to affront his conviction, and the owner of a newspaper must turn his editorial pages over to any young hooligan who clamor for the enslavement of the press. It means that one group of men requires the right to unlimited license, which another group is reduced to helpless irresponsibility. But since it's obviously impossible to provide every claimant with a job, a microphone, or a newspaper column, who will determine the distribution of economic rights and select the recipients when the owner's rights to choose has been abolished? Well, Mr. Minow has indicated that quite clearly. And if you make the mistake of thinking that this applies only to big property owners, you had better realize that the theory of economic rights includes the rights of every would-be playwright, every beatnik poet, every noise composer, and every non-objective artist who have political pull to the financial support you did not give them when you did not attend their show. What else is the meaning of the project to spend your tax money on subsidized art? And while people are clamoring about economic rights, the concept of political rights is vanishing. It is forgotten that the right of free speech means the freedom to advocate one's views and to bear the possible consequences, including disagreement with others, opposition, unpopularity, and lack of support. The political function of the right of free speech is to protect dissenters and unpopular minorities from forcible suppression, not to guarantee them the support, advantage, and reward of a popularity they have not gained. The Bill of Rights read, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. It does not demand that private citizens provide a microphone for the man who advocates their destruction, or a passkey for the burglar who seeks to rob them, or a knife for the murderer who wants to cut their throats. Such is the state of one of today's most crucial issues, political rights versus economic rights. It's either or, one destroys the other, but there are, in fact, no economic rights, no collective rights, no public interest rights. The term individual rights is a redundancy. There is no other kind of rights and no one else to possess them. Those who advocate laissez-faire capitalism are the only advocates of man's rights. And this was published in April in 1963. And Man's Rights from Capitalism, the Unknown Ideals of Ayn Rand. And the reason why I chose this essay is not only does it speak about the rights of the individual, but also to look at ourselves in terms by understanding this. It gives us a better look inside ourselves in terms of how we treat other people and how we help other people. So for example, the Economic Bill of Rights, which actually, as the essay said, was written by Franklin Roosevelt. It's very important. It's very important because we're at a time where coming out of World War II, lots of issues, the civil rights movement, the Jim Crow laws for black people, during the Reconstruction era. Black employment were at an all-time high. Black people had many skills because they were slaves, and white people really didn't have the skills because why pay a white man or a white woman to do a job when you have a slave who could do it for free? So after the Reconstruction era, black people had their own businesses, black doctors, lawyers, perhaps lending institution. They were buying up a lot of land, that sort of thing. And so to quelch that economic advancement, the American government opened up the floodgates to immigration, which is not a bad thing. But when you have an intent of opening the floodgates of immigration to take away the jobs of black people, to keep them in economic desperation, then that is a problem. So, in that regard, I disagree with Rand and her assumption that the Economic Bill of Rights is really not a right at all. Um, I mean, it isn't to the point, but it kind of levels the playing field a bit. People talk about uh, affirmative action. You have to realize that, when you have skilled employees that are black or minorities, in period, that are not given the opportunity just because based on their skin color, then that is a problem. And you have to find some way of leveling the playing field for those minorities. But, if we live in a society where um, color did not exist, and racism did not exist, then I think that this essay would most definitely hold true 100%. But we do not live in a society like that where black people are being experimented on, black and poor people are being experimented on, black, white, Asian. The U.S. government, their legal experimentation, mind control, torture. These things are very heinous, and you think about that the government was formed to protect the people, and and to serve the people, and it is we have no protection as individuals because the government literally seek to enslave us in some way. And I wanted to make this essay very clear, and I wanted to make my thoughts very clear on this, that when it comes to the rights of the individual, it is important that we do not violate those rights, and we do not allow others to violate the rights of other individuals as well. Um, you know, Many people are, suffering out there. This mind control stuff is really gone to the point where, people are being destroyed, their families are being destroyed, their health is being destroyed, and it's a plot. I mean, when you look at all the evidence, it's a plot. You think about state-sanctioned terrorism. Look at what Hitler did. It's the same thing that's being done here. If you look in your neighborhoods, you'll see uh, video cameras now all over the place. More so in urban communities because they claim that it help reduce crime, but really and truly is really meant for spying. When you have so many police officers, why aren't we seeing police officers out on the street talking to people, getting to know people in their communities? It makes for a very lazy police department, and they don't these video cameras really do not act as a deterrent. The presence of police officers act as a deterrent. Um, Police officers who know people in the neighborhood, when a crime is committed, people are more likely to talk to a police officer. I mean, what are they going to do? Talk to a video camera? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. People can wear masks and all this kind of hoodies to hide their identity from these cameras. So, there's something else that's going on that the government is not telling us, and we ought to be very mindful of that. And I am definitely a advocate for the beat cop. I remember when I was growing up in New York City, I would see police officers all the time. And now when I go to New York City, I hardly see any police officers on foot unless I travel into the city itself. But the surrounding areas, Brooklyn, Queens, I just see police officers in squad cars. I don't see them, in a corner somewhere, or walking down a block somewhere, unless it's like in the the wealthier neighborhoods or downtown Brooklyn, that sort of stuff. But around the neighborhood, from the 4 days that I was there in Brooklyn in my neighborhood, I did not see not one police officer on foot. So we seem to be going away from a trend of human contact, of getting to know people, to now, we're just, it's like whatever. So, but in terms of the mind control and the experimentation, this essay is important because they are basically violating your rights, and we all know that, but there's just no way. They try to use whatever term, and when I think about how they treat us, it's like the law of like eminent domain. When you think about it, they say, well, I can take away your property for the economic advancement of the neighborhood. So you're saying that you're going to torture me for the advancement of science and or whatever. I mean, that's just ludicrous. That makes no sense. I am a person and not the property of any government or any individual or any entity. I am my own person. I own myself. I belong to myself. And that is something that, that they need to realize. And I decided to make this video for that simple reason, to teach them what is a right, and what is the right of an individual, so that they do not violate our rights, or our right to live, to exist, um, you know, free from coercion, free from torture, especially when you are a law-abiding citizen. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. I know it's a little bit lengthy, and but I'm going to post a link to this essay, and have wish you guys a great day. It is Thursday, and I am about to head to the gym. So have a great day, and until my next video, you guys take care, and be healthy, healthy mind, healthy body. Whether you're spiritual or or religious, healthy mind, body, and soul. So you guys take care. Until next time. Bye bye.